So I'm going to start off and I'm going to just introduce you. If I get something wrong, please feel free to correct me. Dr. Ann-Louise Lockhart, I got all that right so far.
Yes.
Is a pediatric psychologist, I have it all here, and a parent coach, and a business owner of a New Day Pediatric Psychology, right, in San Antonio, Texas. And from what I saw in your bio, you have been in many, many places, but that is where you are now. And you have your doctorate in clinical psychology, board certified in clinical child and adolescent psychology, and you have 2 children, ages 10 and 7. Is a boy and a girl, girls, boys?
Girl is the older one and the boy, the younger one.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
And then Mr. Anthony, I haven't seen you face to face in a long time. So this is Anthony Ailbocas, right?
Yep, you got it. Perfect.
He is a healthcare professional, behavioral health assistant. I can let you explain a little bit more in detail what that means if you want to, because it's not my field. So if you want to explain what that means.
Absolutely. I work in the psych emergency room. So we work with the at-risk population of mentally ill or anyone who has psychiatric issues who come into the emergency room. So I basically help the nurses with anything from medication to getting food to searching patients, dealing with property and documentation. As you know, I worked with Yehudis in the past at a daycare called, not daycare, but a preschool called Cane Street Kids. So we worked with the young ones before. So I'm not currently in education, but I do have some experience there as well.
Right. So,
and I have 4 boys myself.
Yes. Okay. So let's just jump right in. And the number one question that I've gotten so far, and just to kind of clarify, I'm sure everybody knows this, the topic of this panel is how to speak to young children about racism and inequality, which of course, most of us are trying to figure out how to do in the best, most productive way. So my opening question to you, and I can ask Dr. Lockhart first, is there an age that is too young for this conversation?
That's a great question. So as we know as professionals, kids, their language is play. So we're not going to sit down with our 1-year-old and talk to them about racism and inequality, because that's just ridiculous, right? Because they play. And their language is symbolic play, symbolism, all that kind of stuff. So I pulled this up because I've been asked this question a lot, and I had to pull up my old graduate school stuff and then research to see if there's anything that was changed. But by 6 months of age, babies notice racial differences.
Wow.
And not that they're going to be like, oh, I'm racist against you. They just notice it. They notice when people look different. And then by age 3, they notice and comment on differences in skin color. And if they're not guided, they will develop biased attitudes from exposure to negative comments. And then by age 4, they will show signs of racial bias.
Wow. So go ahead. Sorry.
So is there too young of an age? No, because we need to expose them to various things because they're already noticing. So what that looks like, in my professional opinion, and personally, is to expose them to dolls and toys and books and artwork and friends and schools and people who represent a variety of looks and skin colors, because that way they start to know, oh yeah, the differences are good, and there's beauty in everything. And so early on, it's just exposing them to that so that they don't start to develop that bias because of differences. So I say, no, there's no too early. It's not too early, because they're at 6 months, they're noticing it anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So Anthony, I want to ask you a question in 1 second, but just to kind of piggyback on that, as an early childhood educator, one thing, especially in progressive education right now, is this concept of children learning most efficiently and most effectively in an organic way, right? What they are exposed to, that is how they learn, and that is what becomes meaningful to them. So that kind of goes hand in hand with that concept that you're speaking of right now.
Totally.
Yeah, wow. So Anthony, my question for you is, Do you remember those conversations that you had? Do you remember at what age you decided to have those conversations? What prompted you to have those conversations? I know your children are kind of, you just have, Anthony has a newborn baby at home. So,
well, for me, the conversation, I want to say for me, with me and my family, it kind of started when our oldest, I want to say, was about 8 or 9. And like the doctor said, we tried to keep it and word it in a way where he would understand. Well, now he's 13, so you can see the gap there. But like the doctor said, it wasn't so much about telling him what racism was, but keeping it on his level and just letting him know that, yeah, there's probably going to be people out there who see you as different, but not to get angry at it, and to kind of, you know, if it's mean and it's nasty, of course, you don't feed into it, but just know that there may be people out there who might treat you differently because you look differently, and know it's not okay, but it's the way things are. Because the thing about it was, we didn't even have a chance to really think about when we were going to do it. He kind of came to us and said, you know, I had a kid in class and there was a situation, and the situation was kind of, I wouldn't say forced upon us, but, you know, we had to speak about it at that point. So
right.
We did it a little bit later, but yeah, I think the beginnings of it, because I worked in the early childhood area, and like I said, it doesn't really have a limit to how young you should be before you start, you know, exposing children to these differences, I believe.
If you are speaking to, let's say, an audience that is not African American or of color, how would you guide us or advise us to begin that conversation? And with what kind of introduction? How should that conversation go? And of course, that changes from age to age, I'm sure. But for a young child, let's say, you know, I have a 6, almost 7-year-old. How would that conversation go, do you think? What would be the most developmentally appropriate way to do it? And how do you think that it should progress? I mean, I can ask either of you for your opinion.
I can jump in for a little bit. So I think with the really little ones, yes, I think it's just having a very direct and upfront conversation about what they notice. Because I think what I've been hearing a lot this past week is a lot of parents are concerned about taking away their child's innocence. And saying, oh, kids are colorblind. And as I've just said, they're not. They're not colorblind. They're noticing it as early as 6 months of age. Where they're attributing negative or positive is at 3 or 4 because of what they've been exposed to and what they've heard in their family. So that's why at an early age is just noticing, okay, tell me about what color you are. Tell me about what you notice about it. And what do you think about? And I had an interview for a podcast. And one of the interviewers, she tagged me because she was, after speaking to me, she was like realizing she hadn't had that conversation with her little one, and they're white. And she asked him, you know, tell me about what you notice about your skin color. And he's like, I'm peach. And I just thought that was so adorable, because my kids call white kids in their class peach too. They're like, they're technically not white, mommy, they're peach.
Right.
And so, you know, so he was noticing what different colors, because mommy is more olive. And so noticing all these different things. And I think it's just really just asking them, what do you notice? And if you have a friend who's a different color, what color are you? And to describe that, and just to have that conversation very frankly. And I think that's where it starts, is that very early on is just noticing, because they're already noticing anyway, but we don't have to attribute any judgments or values based on that. Is just introducing the conversation and being able to introduce them, like I said earlier, to people and art and movies and characters, film that represent various cultural groups, because I think that's where a lot of that foundation comes in. So then it's just a normal part of their life, that it's just not, doesn't have to be bad.
Right. And actually, there was another topic that I thought was going to come a little later, but I think that this is a perfect time for it, which is this concept of color blindness.
Yes.
And I know that when I was a kid, and even when I was teaching, let's say 10 years ago, we would do these different activities during our diversity week of, you know, the brown egg and the white egg, and we're different on the outside,
Yes.
but we're all the same on the inside. And I'm not taking away, you know, there's no judgment on that. But from what you're saying, Dr. Lockhart, if developmentally children are already noticing difference, and we then, when they're young, try to tell them that everyone's actually the same and they shouldn't notice difference, then we're in essence kind of training them the other way.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, when we speak about, I have it because I was writing notes over here, the difference between inclusive parenting or teaching, which from my research refers to that kind of, we're all the same, we shouldn't notice color, and you know, we're all the same on the inside and it doesn't matter what we are on the outside, versus anti-racist parenting and anti-racist teaching if you're an educator. And how much importance do you place in that distinction?
I think that inclusive parenting, saying we're all the same, we're not.
Right.
We're not all the same. We have different makeup, we have different interests, we have different accents and language and hair, and we are different, and it's okay. And so I always tell people that, you know, I've had friends tell me, oh, I didn't even realize you were Black. I never saw it, or I'd never noticed your color. And I'm like, I don't quite know how to take that, because if you're seeing me for my interests and what you like about me, that's great. But the fact is, I am a different color, and that's okay for you to notice that. I just don't want you to treat me negatively because of it. And so I think that's where that inclusive parenting and that inclusive teaching is like, oh, we're all the same, love everybody, and it's just hold hands and be at peace. That would be great if we literally were, but we're not, and it's okay.
Right.
And that's where I think that anti-racist parenting is so important, because we're literally actively teaching our kids to stand up to injustices. If you see or hear an uncle saying something inappropriate, or there's an inappropriate joke that a kid says, or that to stand up against it in whatever way you can, whatever way that allows you to do that. So I think there's a significant difference between the two. And I think we're doing a disservice to our kids when we just say to just love everybody the same, regardless of anything.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Lockhart on that, you know, we're not all the same. Even within our own communities, we're different. And I believe the kids should know that. And it's absolutely okay. And not only that, but like I was saying with my children, like Dr. Lockhart was saying, and even you, Yehudis, they understand that there's a difference. So to say that there isn't, you're not only doing a disservice to them, but also to yourself as well, because we all have different customs and different ways of doing things that should be all represented equally. And like you said, even though we're different, it doesn't make anyone better or worse. We can still love each other. We can still be friends, and it's okay. And working in the preschool with Yehudis, and I want to say a big shout out to Mrs. Joyce Heller, who had me working there in a Jewish preschool in Brooklyn. I've gotten to see so many different aspects of not just being an African American in a Jewish preschool, but also seeing it from the other way, you know, and seeing kids who don't really see people who look like me all too much. A 6 foot tall man working in a Jewish preschool, you know, it was different. And it was an eye opener, not just for the children, but for myself. And to know that even with those children being in a community like that, love and respect was still given, not just to me, but to them. And they knew it, and they enjoyed coming, and they even would point out differences too. And like Yehudis said, we would just make sure they understood that, yes, I'm different, but it is okay. And like I said, there was never any too young or anything like that. Can I just say one thing? I just want to thank all the people who are joining in. I didn't realize this would be this big. And so the fact that you have so many people who are interested, I think this is part of the solution of people do want to know, but they genuinely have questions. So I just want to say thank you to your panelists, and thank you to you for even having me as part of your Zoom conference here.
And I want to say thank you again also, because I'm learning so much, and that's really why we're here. So can I ask you to explain what the term even means. What does it mean when we speak of white privilege? How does it apply? And what are the repercussions, do you believe, in kind of pretending it doesn't exist?
That's a great question. I think that privilege means having an advantage over another. So that's kind of basically, right? So if you have white privilege, it means that it doesn't mean that your life hasn't been hard and you haven't experienced any hardships. It means those hardships aren't because of your skin color. And there have been many accounts of people who are Black and who have economic privilege, athletes, you know, actors, celebrities, but yet they're still treated differently because they're Black. And so when it comes down to it, you can have all the money you want and you're still Black. That difference, that privilege, that you don't have to think about that. So that you can move into certain areas, you can move about different stores or communities and not have to think about it. And I remember a few years ago, I speak around the country, and I did a 3-day tour in Montana. Beautiful area. But I went 3 days without seeing a single Black person.
Wow.
3 days. Nobody in the workshops, nobody on the street, nobody in the stores, nowhere. And I literally felt invisible for 3 days. I felt like people would not want to establish eye contact with me. I'd go to a restaurant and they would ignore me. Like, that's uncomfortable for me. I don't feel safe in those situations. And I wasn't in an unsafe area. I just felt invisible. And so that white privilege that everybody else had was that they could show up in the world and they could be seen, they could be served, and they didn't even have to worry about the color of their skin. So I'm constantly aware of it when I'm in certain areas. I'm aware of it. When I'm treated differently, the first thing I think of is it because I'm Black that they're treating me this way? Are they not helping me in this boutique because I'm Black? Like, that's the first thing I think of. Because when I see everybody else in here that's white and they're being served and helped, why? What's the difference? So that privilege just means that you don't have to think about that you're being treated differently because of the color of your skin. That's your privilege when you show up in the world.
Right. Anthony, do you have anything to add? Maybe how it's affected you or how you feel? Do you have any similar experiences?
Well, I can explain from my personal experience. Yes, like being an my mother's originally from the Caribbean, but I've grown up here since I was a few months old, and being a big Black man who, 6'4", walking into stores, I can see how people look at me and how I'm followed, and just little things like that in my everyday life. Yes, I have seen it, and I believe there's certain things in my life that if I was a white person, I wouldn't have to worry about. Even my interactions, to bring it to something relative to today, my interactions with police, like when I stop the car, my hands on the steering wheel, not to reach too quick for my ID or anything like that. These are all things I feel like maybe, and I don't want to sound like only Black people think about these things, but these are things, me as a parent, I have to also not instill in with myself. My mother had to instill in me, but I also have to instill in my boys, and I know you're probably gonna get to this, but for instance, what to do if you're, stopped by police, just these things. And I don't want to jump ahead of where you are.
That's exactly what I want you to be able to express is those kinds of situations, because I think, like, again, when it comes to white privilege, many people are losing sight of what it means. I'm saying from the white perspective because of that defensiveness. So please, we want to know that. It's very insightful.
Okay. So for instance, me and my wife and I, Flolina, we had to have a talk with all 4 of my boys, because all I have is boys and I love them very much. But we had to have the talk with them as if they were stopped by police. Like if they were with a group of friends. My oldest son, he's old enough to literally go home by himself or with friends. So if he's stopped by police, what are you supposed to do? If a police officer tells you to stop, are you supposed to run away? I told him, no, you're not supposed to run away. And if they tell you to put your hands up, make sure and put your hands up. And if they ask you to reach in your pocket, do not, reach down in your pocket. And I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I told him, listen, you have to understand, because of who you are, you have to do things a little bit differently. And what I told him was, tell the officer, listen, sir, I don't feel comfortable. My wallet is in whatever pocket. If you would like, you have to go out and get it. Now think about that for a second, that this is a police officer my son has to tell that to, that he doesn't feel safe going into his pocket because he doesn't know what might happen. And of course, my son is 13, and all the other ones, they're younger than him. But these are the conversations that had to be had with them. Even when, taking it to something like, taking them, if they're ever taken into a precinct, because this has happened before, not to be rude to anybody, but I told them, listen, you tell the police officer, listen, I don't feel comfortable until my mom and dad gets here, and I made them all recite my phone number. And you tell them, listen, I don't want to answer questions until my parents get here. And I was looking at the documentary with my wife about the Central Park Five. Yeah. And I don't want to take us off topic, but the little boy Corey, who went to the police station, he was going there to help a friend. And the friend ended up being picked up by his parents, and the police, held on to him. And, he answered questions and everything else, getting himself into more trouble. Now, I understand that was a movie, but these are just some of the things as a Black parent that, we are scared of. You know what I'm saying? Because these are some of the things we have seen happen within our communities, with our friends and with our families who we've heard stories with. And Dr. Lockhart, I'll let you jump in whenever you feel comfortable. But these are some of the conversations that we have to have with them. And it's not just a one-time thing. This is something that we have to routinely have with them.
And I think, Anthony, I love that you gave that example. And that makes me so sad, because I think that's part of the privilege, right? Is that I'm not, from every white parent and professional I've spoken to, they've never had the talk. They don't talk about this stuff because that's their privilege. They don't have to worry about that. They can mouth off at the cops if they want to. They can yell at them if they want to. They can defend their Black friend if they want to, but they don't have to. They have the privilege of not worrying that they'll be stopped because of the color of their skin. They could be stopped because they're speeding. They could stop because they're stealing, but they don't have to worry about that simply because they're driving while Black. And that is the problem with that whole issue of white privilege, is that that's the issue that's always in the back of our mind. That when we see them, we kind of get tense a little bit because we're not sure, okay. And it's that visceral, it's that visceral reaction that that a lot of white people don't have, honestly. And I think that's where that comes from as well too, is where that systemically, a lot of Black people are afraid of the police.
Right.
And another part of white privilege is, since all the stuff that's going on in the news with the murder of George Floyd and everything going on in the news with the protests and everything, I have heard from so many white friends and colleagues have told me almost always the same thing. I didn't know. I didn't know it was this bad.
Oh, right.
I didn't know that you experienced the world this way. I didn't know. And I was like, well, how didn't you know? But that's privilege. You don't have to know. Right. You don't have to know. And so it makes sense to me that they don't, but also that's part of privilege. And so I think when I feel like people are being resistant to that, it's like, you have to admit why you're resistant to it and seeing the truth. And also that you have to admit that you are benefiting from not having, that you could be turning a blind eye to it and you don't have to know about it.
So Anthony, did you want to jump in, or I know you have to go in a minute.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, part of the color blindness issue, I feel is, part of the reason why a lot of people don't understand what other people are going through, because like you said, they genuinely don't know. And the fact that you have platforms like this for people to come on and express the differences and see the differences. And not only that, understand that, yes, my life isn't the same as yours. And maybe that might not be bad or worse or better or whatever, but it's different. And just understanding that is different is a big step towards where we should be. And I think with everything going on, it's opening a lot of eyes. And opening a lot of eyes and hopefully opening a lot of hearts to people understanding the differences between people.
Right, absolutely. By the way, Anthony, Anthony is actually here on his break from work. He's at work right now, and he's spending his lunch hour, in quotes, his lunch hour with us. So I really, really, I mean, I'm so appreciative of you being
No,
here.
it's okay. I'm just going to try to go up into the end of as much as I could here.
Good. Okay. Okay. That's great. Okay. So I just want to ask, in terms of speaking to young children, just because this is a question that I received before the start of this panel, can you give specific words on how we speak to a 3-year-old? Let's say, not just, okay, exposing them, of course, but is there something beyond that? Sitting down and having a discussion, this is what's going on in our world. Or maybe 3-year-olds would be too young. Maybe it would start later. But what words, someone asked me if we could do like a script. I said, well, I don't know about a script, but maybe there are actual words that you feel are appropriate and healthy to use.
Okay, so if I'm a Black mom with a Black child,
right?
First of all, I don't think that children, like, really, for me, I think if they're younger than 10 or 11, they don't need to know and have a play-by-play of every gruesome shooting and killing of a Black person in America. Like, talk about traumatizing, vicarious trauma, and they would be fearful of ever going outside. So I don't have that direct conversation with my kids about that.
Okay.
However, if you have a young child, 3, 4, 5, and you're a Black parent with a Black child, I would say having a conversation about our people, and talking about how, this is like what I told my kids. I love being Black, and I love that you're Black. I love the color of your skin. It reminds me of like cinnamon and nutmeg. However, there are times when, because we look different and we are different in terms of our color, people will treat us differently.
Right.
And doesn't feel good. And we wish it wasn't like this, but unfortunately, that's how people have treated us. Now, if they're younger, you could use less words, of course, and just say that, you're different than your friend. And you can even use examples, because again, if you can get as concrete as possible, that will be helpful. But your skin color is different, and you are different in many ways. And let's talk about how you're different and how you're similar. And you talk about the features. Tell me about your eyes. Tell me about your hair and your texture and your skin color and all those different things. And talking about, well, why do you think we're different than each other? And be able to give them those words and say, yes, your best friend is white, I'm Black, or whatever it is, so that they understand what that looks like and the words to use for that. And then even celebrating through it. So really like how we celebrate our culture. So, Anthony, you say that your mom's from the Caribbean, and it's funny because my best friend growing up, her last name was Ailbocas, and she was from Trinidad. Wow. Is that where your mom's from?
Yes, she is.
Yes. And I love that, because when I was growing up, I had all kinds of friends, and we would talk about, why we look differently and how our hair was different. And my friend would be like, yeah, I'm like, why is your hair so straight, but you're brown like me? I don't get it. She's like, because I'm Indian. I was like, oh, sweet. So then we talked about it and be able to explore that and talk about that. That's how you talk about it. That's how you help them understand that differences can be celebrated. And sometimes not everybody's going to celebrate it with.
Yeah, and absolutely, I totally agree with Dr. Lockhart. And also, like you guys so eloquently said, reinforcing the positivity of every difference, right? Because just because your hair is straight and my hair is curly, or something looks different, we could always enforce that positivity. That's what I do with my kids. Like, my son's hair is one of my middle son, Terrell, his hair is very coarse, while the baby, his hair is very straight. Now, we all know that babies have straight hair when they're babies, but like I said, we're not avoiding it, and this is within my own household. So I can only imagine when it comes to a larger group of children who look different. I know in Kane Street, I've had children ask me many times, oh, your beard feels different, or your hair feels different. And I would go, yeah, it's okay. Your hair looks different too. And, just that curiosity and basically talking to these children about the differences and reinforcing the positivity of, yeah, your hair is different from mine, but your hair is very beautiful too, is a step. And like I said, working with Miss Heller, who was my supervisor, my boss, the head of Kane Street at that time, she would do things like buy multicultural paper and multicultural crayons and do multicultural art. And at first, when I was younger, I really didn't understand, like I kind of knew, but as I've got older, I understood that just having those things in there and ingraining it, like it wasn't just a week or a day or just, you know, a month. It was things that we did within the curriculum that showed the differences and celebrated everything. And it didn't have to be put up on a soapbox to say, you know, this is black and this is brown and this is, they were colors that were all celebrated and differences that were all celebrated. And I'll let you go ahead with that, Ms. Yehudis.
We have 15 minutes left. Maybe we can open up to some questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm ready for
we
it.
have 38 here, so I have a feeling we're going to have to kind of just as many as we can. Okay. Here's one. I'd like a follow-up question for Dr. Lockhart. At what age do you switch from play, so the books, the dolls, the toys, and begin to have conversations with kids about racism? And I think you said around like, let's say 10 or 11, right? You said that's usually when
I would say earlier. I mean, you know, 7, even as young as 7, I just don't talk to my kids about the atrocities that are going on with African Americans in the media. But I took them when they were 7 and 9 to the Institute of Texan Cultures that highlight all the cultures in Texas that came to Texas, and in one way or the other, or we're here. And that really highlight all the things that happened to those cultures. And we talked about it. It was hard because they were seeing a lot of how people of color, Black people, Mexicans, Lebanese, everybody were treated so poorly. And it was hard talking to them about that, but they needed to hear it. And it made my son angry. Oh. And he was very vocal about it while we were in the museum, but being able to talk about that and talk about, he kept saying, "Why, mommy? Why do they hate Black people so much?" Wow. And I'm, you know, to be able to talk about when he's like, "Well, why did we have to sit at the kitchen, the restaurant counters? Why couldn't we use bathrooms? Why is it colored? Why did it?" And to be able to have those tough conversations, I think if they're developmentally around age 7 or 8, you can start having the conversations about history and things that maybe aren't so pretty about our history. And to be able to then talk about it and explore it some more. So yeah, I would say 7 or 8, you can really start talking to them as well about white history, European history, all of it.
This is a really interesting question. How do you broach the topic of the police in regards to this conversation? They're included in community helper sets, but we know that they aren't always helpers. Sometimes they are the cause of the hurt. So Anthony, do you maybe have something?
Yeah, I was gonna say on that, like, I want everyone to know that I don't think all police are bad. Don't get me wrong. I work with the police. There are some very, very fine people working with the police department that I even deal with to this day when they come into the emergency room. Now, with that being said, I believe exposure to the police, like we used to do in Cane Street when we would have people of different backgrounds come in and just talking about what they do and just exposing children to who the police are is a good thing, like we do now. But like I said, as an African-American parent, I also know that the other conversation has to be had as well. Now, as far as you were saying, I'm sorry, the question was, you were saying, when should that happen?
No, they were just saying, how do you work the concept of police into these conversations? Because they are, you know, community helpers, they're in the community helper sets.
Okay.
How they're supposed to keep us safe, but sometimes that's not the case. So how do you reconcile that?
Now, that's the thing. I explain to my kids, like with everything else, in every background, there's good and bad people, right? But at the end of the day, yes, the police are ultimately there to help you. That's their job, right? So if anything goes awry, yes, I would want you to go to police and I would want you to ask for help. That's not something you should ever play with, but I do also want you to understand, and let me explain to you that when you do this, there's certain things, and as we say, because of the color of your skin, there's certain ways you have to address and deal with things, right? So, like I said, I don't want my children personally that I take care of or any child to ever be afraid of any first responder. Working in a hospital, it is our job to help everyone, not just anyone we feel like or people we like or don't like. So the fact that, you know, me even saying that you should be scared of police and don't go to them and everything, I think you're doing your children a disservice. So like I said, be very upfront and honest, and also explain to them, like, you have many different people working in a group. They may or may not be some bad people there, but that doesn't mean dislike everyone, because that leads us back to square one, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we think that every police officer is bad and every police officer is going to kill us, then, you know, when we actually do need help, you know, we won't, our kids would feel scared to reach out to them. Dr. Lockhart?
Well, I think also too, excellent points. And I think that in order to educate our kids, we have to educate ourselves. And I mean, you know, as Black people, as white people, as Hispanic people, like we have to understand and do the work in terms of our own prejudices, our own bias, and our own knowledge, because a lot of people don't have the adequate history, because our schools don't teach the right history, honestly. Right. And so I think we have to do the work and we have to understand it. And I think we also have to understand historical and generational trauma, and explaining why, for example, Black people have reactions to certain things compared to other people, because those things get ingrained in our DNA, gets passed on, and then we have a reaction in the present day. And a lot of people have negative reactions to the police because of where the role of police, the slave patrol is what they were called in the South during slavery. And so though, in kind of educating yourself on those, I think is important, rather than blaming Black people, is to understand why Black people may have a visceral or fearful reaction to the police because of generations of what the police did to our people.
Absolutely. Wow. I have a few questions here that all are asking the same thing. So it's basically, can you elaborate more on the concept of anti-racism? When it comes to teaching, whether you're a teacher or whether you're a parent, what does that look, what more can you tell us about what that would look like, as opposed to just, like we said, like the inclusive parenting? I know we spoke about, you know, color blindness versus celebrating our differences, but do you have, Dr. Lockhart or Anthony, any other more concrete ideas of what anti-racist parenting or teaching looks like?
I think for me, the most basic definition I've heard, which I really like, is it's not enough just to be empathetic towards Black people. Right. You have to be against racism. So everybody who's saying, I just love everybody and diversity is beautiful, like that's not being anti-racist. That's and nice. It doesn't do anything for me. Right. Right. So being anti-racist is to be actively, to take a stand against racist attitudes, beliefs, values, and systemic issues related to racism. And to take a stand. So, you know, I saw that so much this week, where like online boutiques who have all white girls as models, people saying, hello, can you bring some color up in there, you know? Or CEOs and board of directors and organizations saying, hey, we patronize your organization, your company, your business. Can you please have more? No, we demand that you have more representation. So being anti-racist means that you're just not passively saying that we support everybody. It's saying that, no, I'm taking a stand against racist ideals and attitudes.
I just wanted to say, a big part of it to me is actually being able to listen without becoming defensive, and just being able to understand, like Dr. Lockhart said, understanding that we all don't come from the same place, but listening and understanding that, you know, our way of growing up was different. And just to go off what you guys were saying from the toys, from, you know, just to bring it back to the children, it was only up until recently that we had Barbies of different colors, you know, and these are things that we have to show, you know, the children that, you know, being different, it's okay. And also including it in play is a huge thing. And just creating forums like this to put a spotlight on these differences without anyone having to become defensive or anyone feeling attacked, I think it's a huge help to relations, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is so eye-opening. I know for me, I'm sure for everybody else. There are so many comments here that are just like, this is amazing. This is amazing. So that's really amazing to hear. I have someone here writes, I have a half Black, half Asian nephew who is raised primarily by his Asian mother. We want to educate him and answer his questions but we don't want to have this, but we don't have the same experiences that would be able to connect with him. How can we have a more meaningful conversation with him, knowing that we don't come from the same place that he does?
That's a great question. I mean, I have several friends who've either transracially adopted or have mixed children through marriage and or different relationships. And one of the things that I really admire by a lot of them and what they've done is that they've made sure there were meaningful people in their children's lives and part of their family that were of that ethnicity.
Right.
And to introduce things from, you know, you have a child that you adopted from Ethiopia, that you have someone, you have Ethiopian art, stories, and teaching them their history, or a child who's biracial, teaching them about that other part, to teach them how to do their hair. Yeah. Many times a white mom or Asian mom doesn't know how to do hair that's mixed with Black, and make sure that you know how to do it, that you seek people out who do that. There's someone here in San Antonio who teaches transracially adopted kids and their parents how to do their hair. It's that's something that seems so simple, but it's very important in the Black culture. So I think that's where you really are making sure that you integrate those things in the conversation and have people that represent from that culture as part of the family and the child's life.
Anthony, do you have anything, or what do you think?
My internet is kind of going in and out, but I was gonna say I'm sorry. My hour's kind of running out, but it was a pleasure, and I thank you for having me as part of this group. But I have to run back downstairs to the emergency room. Dr. Lockhart, it was wonderful, Ms. Yehudis.
Anthony.
Thank you again.
Thank you for being here, Anthony. Okay. I have a few people here, Dr. Lockhart, who are asking the word Black or African American. Which terminology should we be using with our children?
Either. So I've had a few people reach out and ask me the same thing, that they had been told that calling someone Black was offensive. And there have been, you know, generationally, there's a lot of history behind different terms, you know, Afro-American, then African-American, Black. And a lot of it is part of the times and how things change. So not everybody who's Black is African-American. I am not African-American. I'm West Indian. I'm from the West Indies, from the Caribbean. I was born and raised there. I'm not African-American. I wasn't born and raised in the United States. That is not what I consider myself, but I do consider myself Black. So there are people from the West Indies, from Central America, from Africa, from all kinds of places, Europe, and they may not necessarily call themselves that. So I would say that you ask people what they would prefer to be called. And for the most part, Black kind of covers it, because then if you're Black, then it kind of covers African-American, African Caribbean, African, you know, Peruvian, all of those as well too. So I would say either one is fine.
Either one. Okay.
But ask the person.
Okay, good to know. I had quite a few of those questions pop up on the screen. So it is 8:58. I really wanted to keep this to an hour, because otherwise I know this is something that we could speak about forever. So I just want to say thank you so much. I actually, based on what you told me earlier, I just want to screen share some books that on.
Can I make a suggestion too? Yes. The questions that you have that we don't get to, maybe we can work together in compiling something.
That sounds amazing.
Like a handout, a download, or something that kind of goes into that.
I think that's a great idea. Okay. Definitely I'll compile them, and I'll send them to you, and we'll figure that out. We definitely want to answer everyone's questions, so that's important.
Yeah.
I have this screen share. It's just some books that, can you see that? You can see that, right?
Yes.
Just some books. Now, I know you spoke a lot about just having just representation around, as opposed to only books that speak about racism, but these are some that are kind of a mix of both. This was just based on some research that I did. And I know you speak a lot about this, the book, A Kid's Book About Racism.
Yes, love that one.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? I have a back order.
If people want to go to my page, I just interviewed the author, Jelani, last week. He is a biracial man, half Black, half white. And it's basically his story. And it's a book for children and for parents who have children, to talk to them about it, whether you're Black or white or biracial or really any ethnicity. and just talking to them as an introductory conversation. And all of their books, they have a series of books that talk about those tough topics that are hard to talk about. And that one I really, really like a lot.
That's amazing.
Hair Love, I love a lot too, because it really celebrates Black hair and just that whole experience. And I love that one as well too.
Okay, great. I'm so happy. Do you know of any of these other books?
Let's see, Little Legends. I think that's the one by Vashti, the one on the top right.
Yes.
I love Vashti. Her Instagram is amazing. She's done a lot of tutorials over the quarantine for my kids to learn how to draw curly hair and different skin colors. So I love that one. Snowy Day, read that one a lot. So yeah, a lot of these I really like. And I think that's where, you know, having those images is so important. So important.
Right, right. I'm going to leave this up for just until the end so people can maybe take a picture with their phone. But I find there's so many resources out there right now. I know that I discovered you on Instagram, and there are so many accounts that I have found very eye-opening. And I want to thank you a lot, very, very much from a personal perspective, because this was something that I really wanted to learn more about, and for opening up your heart and your experience and your mind to everybody who was able to make it. And we will figure out this question situation. Hopefully we'll get all of those answered. And thank you everybody for showing up. And for those who didn't, this is going to be recorded and we will send that out as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Lockhart.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time and you being here. And have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate this. Thanks for showing up, everybody.